Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. We're here live with John Willis from Special Operations Equipment, which is normal every week, and Nicole Sauce from Living Free in Tennessee. And we've got Mike Shelby from Forward Observer. Mike, how's it going today?
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing great. So, Mike, some people on our live stream, I know it's going to be shocking, might not know who you are or what you do. Can you just give us the quick, skinny, who or what is a Mike Shelby, and how did you end up doing Forward Observer?
Yeah, great question. Good place to start. So I was an intel analyst in the Army, and then got out and did some contracting work, contract intel guy for a few years, and I ended up spending 3 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I tell you, in 2012, I just got burnt out going back and forth, and then Obama was president, and we were doing a bunch of hinky stuff that, I mean, not real hinky, but it just made me feel uncomfortable what we were doing. And then seeing those things we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan migrate their way to the United States. And I was a little early, but in 2012, I got out, I quit, called it quits. And then a couple of years later, I started Forward Observer, and we produce intel reports similar to what you would see, obviously unclassified, but similar to what you'd see in the intelligence community. But they're for the general public. And I started that because so many people had questions, and what I thought was like way fringe conspiracy type stuff. There are conspiracy theories or conspiracy facts. However, there's some stuff that's just way so far out there it's not true. So we started digging into those and really trying to give people a better frame of reference as to what was more likely to be true and what was less likely to be true. And it's kind of snowballed into a team effort now. And now we really focus on domestic disruption, so preparedness type stuff, and then geopolitical risk, especially with China.
Yeah. So go ahead, John.
So actionable to U.S. citizens, your viewer base, obviously something actionable.
Correct. Yeah, we're looking for downstream effects to ag and energy, politics, law enforcement. Correct.
And how often? Go ahead.
Do you find that more and more of those are more on the fact side than the conspiracy theory side nowadays? Or do you see them kind of migrating? The stuff you used to think was like, nah, there's nothing to it, but we find out there is.
Yeah, well, I tell you, the Obama administration, a lot of things that they were doing kind of behind the scenes, I would say kind of extra constitutional activity, or kind of, working in the gray zone of that, we're seeing creep back. And, now we're able to track what's happening with Congress a lot better, a lot more in depth than what, staffers are saying and doing. And so, yeah, a lot of the Obama era stuff has come back.
Yeah, it always comes back. It's like that rubber band effect. Comes back, somebody's voted in, it goes away, and it comes back harder. It's been interesting watching that cycle. I first became aware of it in the 90s. So, do you remember PC, the PC movement in the 90s? Did you ever think it was going to end up the woke culture of today?
I mean, I guess that's the logical conclusion, but, I'll tell you, if you look at the people in charge, the kind of the pedigree and the ideology of these people, and then you look at things that happened abroad in various Marxist movements, they rhyme. And then at some point you just say, hey, these people in the United States are so steeped in this Marxist culture, it just makes sense that they're going to follow the same playbook that happened in Maoist China or Algeria or Indochina, Vietnam, and elsewhere. Russia, the Soviet Union and Russia.
So what are the two or three things you think every U.S. citizen should be paying pretty close attention to right now?
Right now, look at the migration of what really has been a Marxist movement, mainly confined to the cities. And now through, you can call it woke ideology or the cultural war or whatever. A lot of that stuff's moving to like pretty conservative areas. And so the message we have at Forward Observer is it's really easy to get caught up in the news cycle and what's happening in DC. But we got to start pulling the curtain back on what's happening in your own local city council and what's happening in your county. And you may not think those people are there, but we're seeing this movement migrate across the country into some very deep red areas. And I know people who pay just cursory attention can kind of see that in a lot of these areas. I'd say that's number one. start lifting up the rug in your backyard and seeing who's there and what the things that they're saying and the things that they're spreading in the schools, in local government, especially too.
Yeah, something I find interesting at the local level that sort of the libertarian or conservative leaning movements have not really grasped onto is when you come into office, there are organizations that invite you to free trainings on how to optimize your effectiveness as a government official and all of that. And that is all well steeped in a left ideology and towards the purpose of tricking people into voting for your stuff, finding ways to silence the dissent so that you can get your policies through. And there is not a counter training to that. The only, like, I can think one or two minor counter trainings to that. There's no active outreach at that level. And once somebody, it doesn't matter if they're conservative or if they're Democrat or Republican, once they've gone through that training, they're moving us left, which is just how that's run. That's part of what made me disgusted with the whole system, of course, because it's like, here's the system, here's how we use the system, and it doesn't matter what people think at that point. Makes a girl not want to vote.
Yeah, those non-governmental organizations and unelected officials, it's real easy to go to a campaign website and say, hey, what is this guy about? But look at the staffers, look at the NGOs behind that person, because a lot of times those people have the real power, unelected officials at the local level, especially. And if I can just say one more thing.
Sure.
When you look at what Ho Chi Minh and Mao and Vo Nguyen Giap did in Indochina and China, the whole Southeast Asia area, they call this thing political decay. And they would send political agents into non-communist strongholds, into these nationalist strongholds, and they would start local political chapters, like kind of underground communist movements. And they would recruit and spread, and eventually they would be powerful enough where they could build a local political party and slowly start to take over. They called it political decay because it was province by province over there. They went into these non-communist areas and they spread their ideology to all the disaffected commoners and peasants. And I'm not saying it's the exact same playbook, but there are a lot of similarities between what happened over there in the middle of the 19th or 20th century and what's happening in the United States today.
Yeah, and the whole system of land use planning, zoning, and all of the smart growth stuff that's been going on for 20s of years at this point here, it's all steeped in that ideology, in that Marxist ideology. It's designed to set a system outside of the government that allows for controls to move us towards communism. And, and we watch very prominent Republicans screaming for zoning to save farms. It doesn't save farms. It does quite the opposite. But that's how they sell it. That's how I come from Oregon, so I watched my whole state get ruined with that sort of the camel's head under the tent was getting really. It was the environment and it was land use planning that messed up that state. And now people are just helpless there. It's just melted down, even though there are great people there. I don't understand why they're still there, but they are still there. And I came to Tennessee and it's like, wow, this is how Oregon was in like the 70s. This is great. You can this is crazy talk. Where I live, you can do what you want on your land. You can have chickens. You can build things that you need to build. The only regulations I need to worry about at this point is if I put electricity in, they care about that, and they'll look at my septic. And that's it. And that's worse than when I first moved here. When I first moved here, there was nothing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But I see all of those same arguments, like the foundation from a messaging standpoint in this state being set up to save the farmland. That's already starting to come. Save the farmland. Like all the growth we're having from people fleeing after they saw the COVID stuff go down, they're getting out of the more regulated areas, coming to places like Tennessee. And then, then they're complaining about not enough animal control, like bad smells and noises. And they want to save the farmlands because people are building houses here now.
That's every one of them in the local Facebook groups here. They've all come from, and I'm like, why did you choose here? What did you throw a dart? And some of them are like, yeah, we kind of did. And they're, why don't we have a bowling alley? Why don't we have all these, programs for kids? Why does the dump smell? Like, what did you think was going to happen when you moved to the middle of nowhere? So who do you think is pulling the strings? I kind of feel like it's the World Wrestling Federation, whether it's Republican or Democrat. Everybody kind of gravitates to one side. It's just the lesser of the evil. I feel like the current Republicans are really just Obama era Democrats for the most part.
At a global level, it's really easy to say, well, it's, Klaus Schwab and World Economic Forum, and that's part of it. There's a really great slide, and if I can find it, I'll send it to you. I've sat in on some political grassroots, like left-wing grassroots training, and they had a slide of all of their political projects and non-governmental organizations and, like Acorn type groups. And there were like 20 or 30 of them just for the state of New York. And I just thought, man, there's nothing like that on the conservative or right side. And that's when it really hit home to me. It's like, dude, WEF is a sideshow where the rubber's actually hitting the pavement is in these local areas with these local NGOs that have no oversight. They're shadow groups, they're shadow funded. And that's where all the power is. I mean, Klaus Schwab can say what he wants, but man, your local area, there's somebody there in the same playbook, just doing it at your local level.
Yeah. And they're very, like the planning commission, they're very subtle. They're like, well, we have to instill permitting fees when people subdivide because otherwise the roads won't be good enough. Like there's always this reason why this case is different than what I believe politically. And I mean, I don't know. I could talk about the problem all day long. What do you do with that, Mike? What do you do with that to actually take steps forward in your life every day?
Well, it's not popular, but I try to tell everyone you have to be building you start with a local preparedness network and you use that to draw people in. And based on that, you build a local intelligence network. You have to identify these political agents. And I'm just going to call them political agents because that's exactly what they are. All throughout history, they're just the modern contemporary version. You have to identify these political agents who are trying to change local laws and ordinances to give government more power in your backyard. Identifying them is always the first step. When you look at the phases of insurgency as well, and this is a proto-insurgency, we're just political insurgency, if you will. It's just not to the armed conflict phase yet. It always starts with organizing, and they're in the organization phase right now. And if you think about this as political decay, they're little cancers in these areas, and you have to find the source of that. So the best thing is like continue to prepare. But unfortunately, I think in the preparedness community, there's just a mindset. Well, I'm just going to prep and stock up a bunch of stuff and wait for the collapse. You got to go on offense. You got to start identifying these people. And the other good thing about having a regional preparedness network and starting a local kind of information sharing network is you can build political, social, and economic power. And that's exactly what these people are building. The socialists call it dual power. It's not enough to engage in electoral politics. They also have to build social power, get people out in the streets, get people agitated, get people to call and email, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so as much as I hate to say it, we have to adopt their similar tactics. We have to counter-organize, because anytime you find a communist insurgency all throughout history, the easiest time to defeat that is in the organizing phase. And once you can identify the organizers, you counter-organize, and then you just build more political, social, and economic power than they do, and you can peel them back. You can defeat them at the local level. And that's not a real popular strategy, but that's what it takes.
Why do you say that's unpopular?
Just everyone wants to focus on guns and ammo, and I'm not. You need to have that to be a credible actor. I mean, self-defense and security is key, but we're dealing with like highly subversive people, and I don't feel like the conservative movement or kind of like the little L libertarian movement is like subversive like they are. But we have to use the similar tactics. I mean, we have to counter organize against them. And everyone, I mean, not everyone, it just seems like there's a lot of people who are just so steeped in, in guns and ammo that they want to focus on hard power and completely ignore soft power. Soft power is what wins low intensity conflict, not hard power.
I think a lot of them are just the leave me alone mindset, right? They don't realize that
exactly.
Every law enforcement agency sent somebody to Homeland Security training, and there's a Homeland Security liaison at every law enforcement department. They're not cataloging Middle Eastern terrorists. They're cataloging you guys that are watching this, right? They are considering us the terrorists. Like, they're literally using that. The whole Walmart program, if you see something, say something. They weren't looking for dudes with rags wrapped around their head. They're looking for dudes checking out with what they consider to be too much ammunition or any of those things. And they are building profiles, right? What he's talking about is when you go to your local government meetings at the courthouse, they're keeping dossiers. You would be surprised if you show up at these things that your name probably comes up in these meetings if you were present to hear it. Like, you should, like, what he's talking about is you have to get out and do the work they're doing. And we don't want to, right? We want to be left alone. And we believe that we're the good guys, and we believe that good always wins. So we don't want to have to fight that fight. And we want to fight this way, not, the sneaky, underhanded, government way. Most of us left to our own devices, like, we don't give a shit what the government does as long as they leave us alone, but they're not going to, more and more. And I mean, you've seen this happen in history. Your neighbor with the sign across the street that hates you, she's keeping tons of notes on you.
Yeah, the funny thing is the fastest way to get some sort of power is on the hyperlocal level. It is the easiest way. I watch the numbers in my county, and somebody will win by 5 votes here. It's 5 votes, and it's because there's only a few hundred people bothering to vote. Sometimes it's more if it's a big deal, but that is, if you have a loud majority. I watched a new neighborhood get defeated by the locals who didn't want more building because they just got mad. They're like, why do we need that? Okay, well, now you can say no to that person. So why? So, I think when you tell people this, Mike, they're not sure how to start. Right. And so I think go to your county commission meetings, or if you're in a city, your city commission meetings, and start listening to what's going on at those. That is usually once a month, usually in the evening, and it'll be like the first Monday or something. Go. And if you can't go, usually they're streamed. Go watch it. It's, 1 or 2 hours of your month, and you can be a lot more informed on what's going on in your community, and then you have a better idea of where to start. What would you say is a good way to start?
Yeah, that's a really great way to start. There are a couple of things I would add to that. Is number one, you have to build a local network. You have to find people who are like-minded, because I can't go to every meeting. There's not enough time in the day. There's people have soccer practice and then got kids and piano and whatever. And the advantage of having a network, a group, even just a group of 5 to 10 people, is you can task people out. Hey, Tom, can you go to the county, whatever political party meeting? And don't just confine yourself to your political party. I'd say go to all of them. But once you find those, this all starts with an area study. And one of the sections of the operational environment is the human terrain. And I always tell people, find the groups that are already established. And I'm not saying this in a nefarious way, but go to these groups, get into their networks, and then look for people you want to add to your own network. People who are like-minded, who are concerned. And again, I would say co-opt these groups to build your own network. That's really the fastest way to build something like that. And then once you have a team, you can just start team tackling all of these things. That's a really solid start.
And what sometimes happens when you go to those meetings is you find out the group you want to start is already started.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find that, it's okay to participate in that group rather than start another group. That's just something, you'd be surprised how many people are already paying attention once you get out. And it is very easy to miss lots of things because of soccer practice. So You are right on. I think strength in numbers helps a lot. I've always, watched the Free State Project with interest, but I think we needed to go at the county level, not the state level on that one. It's like one county you could take over. We could have 1,000 people move where I live right now. It would make a huge difference. And 1,000 people isn't that many people. 100 people would make a difference. So, which is why we're doing the Self-Reliance Festival. So y'all love Tennessee and come into Camden and then buy land there and then boom. Right, John? That's why you're doing this.
Certain people. Certain
people. I'm in that hip Camden group now too. I see what they post about.
It's absolutely insane. You have the most impoverished, and that's why they're coming here, because this was the lowest priced property you could buy. It was the most impoverished county of Tennessee. So there's nothing here. You can come here and live very well if you come with a job, but people are coming here with no jobs and then surprised that there are no jobs for them, and they're looking for government to give to them. So you get a lot more of those people here who are not adding anything, and they're definitely not staying to their own either. They're grumbling, and they're the NPCs, really, is what it is.
So what does making an area study sort of look like, and maybe how could somebody learn more about that in detail?
Sure. Well, yeah, I'll be there in Camden at the end of March, or towards the end of March. There are various templates. They can be as complex or as simple as you want to make them. But we start off with 4 threat types: conventional, irregular, catastrophic, and disruptive. You have to understand what can go wrong, when it can go wrong. And once we're a lot more deliberate and specific about what we're looking for, then we can more actively prepare for that. And then we have to look at what's called the operating environment or operational environment. And I have 6 layers. These are my layers, the things that I think are important. I have a book coming out this month, or in March, that breaks all this down into very granular detail. But I can go through these 6 layers if you want and talk through them.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so we start off with physical terrain. So mountains, rivers, lakes, any kind of physical barriers that could affect you. The thing with an area study is we have these terrain features, and we have to determine which can positively impact us or negatively impact us. Are they assets or liabilities or vulnerabilities or threats? And so it's a simple process. You just go through, you look at all the physical terrain features and say positive or negative. How could I use this, or how could this be used against me? And then we go into the human terrain. And this is a lot more than demographics like, age and race and whatever. This is politics and ideology. What do these people think about law enforcement? What do they think about government? What do they think about you? The more we understand the human terrain, the better we can start looking for allies and look at asset groups and liability groups, or potentially threat groups. After that is critical infrastructure. What makes your world spin? If it stops, how is that going to affect you? And what's the likelihood, or what's the impact that some catastrophic failure of critical infrastructure is going to put you out of commission, or pose a threat to you, or is going to have second or third or fourth, fifth order effects, follow-on consequences for you? And we really just go down that tree, look for what could break, and then figure out the impacts. What's a 24-hour impact? All right, if this is down for 7 days, how is this going to affect me? And then we can really start getting much deeper into the weeds of not just, I need to have 10 days or 10 months worth of food. It's, hey, after 72 hours of this X event happening, we're going to have to deal with Y and Z effects. And those are, people say, I'm preparing for an EMP or societal collapse or hyperinflation or whatever. Okay, all good things to prepare for. But you're not preparing for those things. You're preparing for the follow-on effects. And that's where all the analysis comes in is, all right, we're going to have hyperinflation. How is this going to affect me? After critical infrastructure, there's politics and governance. Who makes the rules? Really focus on unelected officials, NGOs, people who actually make local politics spin, because, a lot of local politics is the same as the national level politics. The little politician spins round and round, and someone else is going to get in there in the next term. But who are the people behind that person who don't leave, who stay? After politics and governance, you have security and defense. So law enforcement, military, I'd say private or irregular security, even down to militia groups. Who are these people? Are they good guys? Are they going to be bad guys? And After that is economics and finance. What are the economic drivers of your area? And a lot of times, the better we can understand the local economy, the better early warning we can have. If if we know a certain industry, say logging or mining, is going to come under further attack, well, that's just more people out of jobs. That's just a very basic scenario. But you look at parts of West Virginia and the Pacific Northwest that have absolutely been decimated economically by natural resource jobs being banned. Those places, I just don't see how they come back. And so getting out ahead of that is important for an area study. It's a lot more complex than that, but those are an overview of the 6 layers.
They come back when they become Greater Idaho.
Hopefully.
I think that's the only way out there. I told you, I don't know if we were talking about this before we started or during, but I got out of Oregon, and watching loggers, families fall into deep poverty was very difficult. And I was for part of my time in logging country, and the wife working a retail store job, and all the substance abuse issues that come with somebody feeling hopeless because they can't get work and all of those things. I think if you listen to Jack Spirko, he talks about what happened to his mining town in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
It became meth town. So that's interesting that you bring up the local economy. The only place you have to go is tourism, I think, when everything falls apart. And that's hard to do when you have problems.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the political and social effects of that may be insurmountable. So yeah, a lot of corruption, and then people just hold their hat out, and the whole culture changes from, hey, my dad worked in the mine, I'm going to graduate high school, maybe go work in the mine and raise a family. And all of a sudden that pipeline's not there for them anymore. And then you have some folks in DC just saying, well, just learn to code or whatever. And those programs don't really work that well. And it's a tough position. Yeah.
That's me learning to code.
Right.
So what do you think about national divorce?
Oh, good. I was going to bring that
up. I'm open to solutions. I think the problems we have as a country are not fixable. Like at the federal level, like the whole take my country back, I think is not going to happen. I'm open to national divorce. My concern is how that weakens us strategically. You look at countries now that have a lot of Chinese influence, and the United States is one of those.
Yeah.
My first concern is, okay, that's fine. We divorce and we split up our counterintelligence and kind of strategic level assets. How do we defend against China coming in and buying up our politicians and owning us? And I haven't seen any strategy to get over that hurdle first. That's a super important hurdle for me personally.
How much of China is already in the United States? For instance, like the sovereign territory in Idaho, where they produce all of the fast food uniforms. They've got their own power generation. I mean, they're bringing Uyghurs in. They're bringing slave labor to the United States to produce. Or, for instance, the largest military runway that we sold to them in Texas, or Long Beach Naval Shipyard. I mean, they have a lot of infrastructure within the United States already. It's almost as though our politicians are already owned by China.
Well, the Chinese have this whole system called elite capture, and that's what they do. They go into these countries, they give important politicians, lucrative contracts and positions on boards of big corporations, and they, make $1 million a year for just using their name. And so, yeah, that is a big problem. I think the first step is this has got to be pushed through by Congress. I don't know that's going to happen, but we have to ban all foreign ownership of any strategic, and I may even go down to the just random residential real estate area, because there are a lot of, if you're a wealthy person in China, you're at risk of everything you own being expropriated by the Communist Party. So that's why China has capital controls. They're trying to keep all that money in China. And there's so many people buying up real estate and anything they can buy here in the United States. And it's not just silver mines, it's residential neighborhoods as well. And ultimately that hurts Americans. And so I think that's a good first step. I think that would go a long way, but man, the United States has never been really good at counterintelligence. And I don't know if maybe that's just lack of political will. But you look at the Biden administration that stood down that State Department team that was really going to go after Chinese influence, and they said, "Well, no, it's going to be racist against Asian people. Like we can't do that." And then they didn't get that program didn't get backfilled by any other project or effort. And it really does make you think, like, who's on the Chinese payroll that's blocking all this stuff?
Who do you think that is?
Well, it's the same. I mean, it used to be the Clinton Initiative. I don't know what they call themselves now, but it's the same cabal of, wealthy politicians. I agree with a lot of people that say the United States is in a looting phase. The politicians, they're just trying to loot as much money from the American people as they can, just expropriate as much money. And so, I mean, that's how the Soviet Union collapsed. And so, if a lot of these elites in America see what we see, the risk of a collapsed empire, then yeah, it would make sense for them to loot the treasury before it all ends. And I don't know 100% that that's the case, but I mean, it's a possibility that can't be discounted.
It certainly looks that way. So China has this digital bank currency that they're doing, and the people, your funds time out, right? You have 90 days or 6 months to spend that money. What's your thoughts on the CBDC that's supposed to be coming into the United States here in July is what we're kind of hearing?
Yeah, I know some Fed officials are against it. I mean, there's a number of people on the Fed Board of Governors who say they don't need it. But I think the overall consensus is the Fed can't fall behind the People's Bank of China. And it's like 80 central banks around the world have some kind of development of a central bank digital currency. I think the Fed will end up adopting that for a number of reasons. One is it'll allow them to have a dual interest rate policy, so they have a different interest rate for cash or like e-money, what we have now, and then a different interest rate for digital dollar, which is what they're going to implement. They say, it's going to allow people cross-border payments, instant transaction, which is, I mean, that is the strong argument for any kind of digital currency.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, unfortunately, it's programmable money. If the Fed wants it to disappear, they'll just disappear it. And it's just going to give the Fed a lot more control. And frankly, you look at the policy, the Fed got us into this situation. I mean, they're a strong player in getting the United States into the poor monetary position it's in right now. And so I'm not real comfortable with giving them that kind of power. Obviously, no one should. They're comfortable with it. But yeah, that's where we're headed, I think. Yeah.
I don't think we stop that.
I feel it's
so. Then, go ahead, John.
I feel like it's more insidious, right? So you're seeing credit card classification codes being changed so that they can't be used with firearms and ammunition, right? Yep. There's two now. It's not sporting goods. Now there's two more, firearms and ammunition. So you're already seeing that happen with mainstream credit cards, and you're starting to see it trickle down to debit cards as well. So we bring in CBDC, and then all of a sudden, that's just a predecessor to the lead up of we no longer need cash. I mean, you saw them not take cash during the CUFIS, right? So I kind of think it's more about control. I think it's probably multifold, but I think the people pushing it some of them believe what they're pushing, but the controllers are much more insidious, right? It's about separation. It's about removing the middle class as well as controlling the people out there. How are you going to, and like China has the long game, the 1,000-year war or whatever. China just recently, or it was just brought back up recently that the biggest problem with the United States is that their citizens are armed, right? Well, that's been said multiple times. It's just more kind of forefront now. But I think it's more insidious than the reasons that they're giving.
I wonder if it matters who, or if it just matters that. Because I know I go down this bunny trail of looking like who is doing these things and who is, setting up CBDCs to manipulate. Is it on a global level? Is it on a space level? I don't even know. And then I think, okay, we find Klaus Schwab or whoever that we can blame for this. And does it matter that I know who it is? I don't know.
Well, if the good thing about having social power is, and again, this is like the least popular thing, but getting people out to vote locally. And I don't know, to exercise any real power. I mean, blocking this stuff at the local level is great, but it's spreading. So we need to have lots of locales teaming together to block it. And the way you achieve victory on a strategic level is start at the tactical level, and then you get a lot of tactical levels, and you have operational level success, like, basically campaign type success that continues to spread. And you're not going to get this at the national level. But if we can really convince our states, and again, this is, I don't know, I don't even know how realistic this is, probably for some states, but if we can block some of this stuff at the state level, like I look at what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida, and I'm just going to leave it at the Florida level, that has so far worked. And if more governors who aren't, I don't know, can I say it, shitbags? If all the governors looked at that as a model, the left's going to go berserk, but let them go berserk. But I think that's the winning policy at the state level. That's really what we have to facilitate. But that starts on the local level.
Let them go berserk. It's their own towns they burned down. I mean, we didn't have any of our shit burnt down. I don't see any of this changing without violence, and I don't see a national divorce without violence. I don't see change without it. And it's not, at least I don't think it is what we would call our side that is out there putting the violence out. But as soon as somebody from our side stands up against that other side, boy, I think it's going to light that fuse. You're going to see multiple incidences of that happen. And everybody's, you've got all these dudes on social media that are kind of hinting and leading up to it. And they're like, but we don't condone, violence. Well, I don't think anybody does, but I don't think it's ever going to change without it either.
That's a part of it. I think probably the most realistic scenario is we have I don't know. It kind of depends on what really ends up happening in the 2024 election. But, you look at Argentina's dirty civil war, and it was a right-wing government going after left-wing activists. And I think you flip the script on that, and that's a very dangerous conflict, low-intensity conflict for us, because not having any kind of state power and in a situation where the state controls by and large controls the media, at least the major themes and narratives, that it's a problem of legitimacy. And the only way we establish and maintain legitimacy is through having elected leaders. Because in this system, we look at elected or not, or I guess I should say elected leaders have some level, at least a base level of legitimacy. And everything comes down to legitimacy. So the question is, okay, if you want to win, then you have to make sure your actions are legitimate in the eyes of the people around you. And that is a lot easier said than done.
What percentage would you say believes this last election was legitimate? I mean, did it matter? Nobody. I don't think his side even believes he's legitimate. Shit, they're about to eat their own right now.
Yeah, well, that was the big surprise from one of those Washington Post surveys. Is there was some level, like 15 or 20% of Democrats who believe that, if I recall correctly, somewhere around that of Democrats had questions, at least questions about election integrity. But the thing, so there's a great book called The War of the Flea. And one of the things that the author points out in that is a lot of people say, well, things will get bad enough and then people will just snap. And he says, that's not the case. Humans adapt. And you look at the Soviet Union, and they were in power for decades, and nobody snapped. That place just collapsed. Maybe because of our history and legacy as Americans, maybe this time it will be different. But I would not bet on that, honestly. So I guess my point is, there may not be a flashpoint. We may just live under the system because there's not enough people. I don't know. The nails that stick up get hammered down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. In the middle of the night with a very large hammer to set an example so that the other nails don't pop up.
Exactly. And for those on the audio podcast, he said the war of the flea, like the little bug that bites you. and I'm pulling it up on screen for y'all who are on the live stream. Somebody was gonna type in a different word that rhymes with flee, I'm sure. So okay, A-Rape here asks, do you think we're gonna have a 2024 election? I got a feeling 2024 is going to be worse than 2020.
Yeah, 2020 was an attempted popular revolution. It's the umbrella term we use is low intensity conflict. It includes everything from terrorism, insurgency, violent social movements, popular revolutions, like what we saw in Maidan in Ukraine, and I think in the Arab Spring before that. I do think 2020 was an attempted popular revolution. You look at Ford Observer, we kind of, I don't know, we're not that big, but for the people who know us, a lot of them started following us in 2020 because we were doing day-to-day updates on these leftist groups, like revolutionary and radical groups. And the message that we were getting from them, the things that they were planning, like the shutdown DC was a part of it, but that was just one small piece. They were talking about shutting down the entire country if Trump stayed in office, legitimately or illegitimately. And they circulated this pamphlet called Choke Points in a Fragile Economy. And it was all about how to shut down the ports and shut down interstate transportation like rails and major commercial hubs. There was basically a plot, at least a conspiracy, to bomb the FedEx facility in Memphis, which is their major hub, to stop interstate commerce. And so you cannot look at the combination, the kind of the cumulative view of all of those things and say, no, these were just people protesting Trump. They weren't. This was an attempted popular revolution. My key assumption is that these people have not gone away. Their plans have not gone away. And they're waiting for another period of acceleration that leads to a trigger point. And if we do have a trigger in 2024 around the election, 25 could be way worse than 2020.
What's your feelings on all the what looks to be attacks on infrastructure, food production, oil facilities, refineries, rail tracks? Any thoughts on that? What do you think's happening?
Well, there is a level of what's called frequency bias, and that's when you're looking for something, you see it more often.
Yep.
Maybe you passed 15 VW Beetles yesterday and you didn't pay any attention. Now you're looking for them. Now they're all over the place. Maybe that's happening. But you look at the geopolitical situation here, and I don't think we could discount foreign sabotage. That is what we call gray zone conflict or asymmetric warfare. It can be very difficult to attribute that to a specific actor. And the whole point of acting within the gray zone is to not reach a threshold of conventional war, but still prosecute a war against somebody. And the Chinese are very good at this. If we look at a continuum or a range of competition, which is what the United States thinks we're in, to crisis, to conflict, and if conflict is a 3.0 open war, China sits at like a 2.5 pretty steadily against the United States, and they're very good at it. We could throw Russia in there as well. So I don't think we can discount that. I can tell you for certain, there have been a number of individuals associated with left-wing revolutionary movements who have been arrested for disrailing trains, specifically in the Pacific Northwest.
Yep. And
that goes all the way back to the Dakota Access Pipeline, was it Standing Rock, all throughout 2020. And then there are the accelerationist movement, the neo-Nazis, and they've been talking also about attacking critical infrastructure. At what level all that stuff's run by the FBI, I don't know. But if we're writing down possibilities, that's a possibility. It can't be discounted either. But I think it's a fairly narrow range of potential actors, and maybe it's a combination of all three or four. But I don't know for certain who.
It makes me want to know how we use that to accelerate liberty at the same time. And I think about 2020 as the example, right? The states where the governors did stand up were very quickly as if there was no pandemic. And the people who have gone through that, who were paying attention, understand that their individual action was part of why that parameter was set. So in some ways, there was that acceleration of, figuring out how to implement draconian oversight, shut down businesses in our economy, that sort of thing. At the same time, the counteraction is seated now. And I think that's something that's important to consciously notice, because even if you don't live in one of the states where that happened, what did they do to make that happen? Because if that happens in your area again, what do you have to do to start that happening in your area? Do you think this will be a war won via tactics or skirmishes? Will it come down to boots on the ground? Everybody asks that question. I'm glad I don't have to answer that, Mike.
Low intensity conflict is real a strategic battle. It's strategic first for a battle over legitimacy. Who has the legitimate right to govern? And we have traditionally identified that through free and fair elections. So if we can't do that through free and fair elections, then it's got to be determined by some other way. Historically, that means whichever side is the more powerful, not on the level of violence, not on the martial level, on the social level. And that's why social organizing, there's a reason why community organizing is a career path on the left. It's not a hobby or recreation. People get paid to do this. And it's that Marxist socialist strategy of dual power. Electoral politics is one, but social power is the other. And on the right, with guys like Chris Rufo and some of the people behind Ron DeSantis, I'm seeing them build social power and deploy it on the state level. And so on a strategic level, that's where this conflict is going to be won. I don't think it's going to be won with street battles or anything like that. That may be a part of it, but that is not going to be the decisive factor in victory.
And that's why you need to get off this live stream and get your butt out the door and go start interacting with communities, guys.
Keep in mind too, when guys say boots on the ground, I know not Slim Perkins, but that means if you're talking military on the ground, that means martial law, right? That's a different, you're not going to like that either. They're not going to be there in your favor. Like the outcome maybe, but it's not going to be a deal where they're like, hey, show up. That's what we do in other countries. We go in, find the people in power and kind of persuade that. That's not how that's going to look in the United States.
Faith says, why don't we on the other side employ our own community organizers? Well, some do. It's just not to the same degree. It's not a valued skill in my experience in the conservative movement or libertarian movement. They give lip service to it. I come from working in the liberty movement. It's the thing I'm best at, but it's not a paid position. What do you got, John?
I can tell you why. It's because we're busy running fucking businesses. We are business people.
Too.
We have lives. The other side, that community organization, those are bureaucrats, right? Those are mostly, for the most part, that is somebody who exists because somebody steals money from people that work to fund that other shit, and you were forced to do business, much like the DMV. Would anybody go to the DMV if you didn't have to go to the DMV? You don't ever seek that out. It's not fun, right? It's not a paid position. And that's why you have people in the world that create things, and you have other people, half of the world, at least within the United States, they say it's actually even more than half, that literally go to a job that could not exist if it wasn't funded by people who didn't want to fund it.
Yeah, I think about it. The one way that I have finally found in my adult years to tap into my natural network development capacity is things like Self-Reliance Festival, where my goal is to make money doing that. And the instant reaction from a subset of our network is what, John? How are the ticket prices too high?
Well, for poor people, they are. I mean, for poverty mindset, they are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When people, it's usually locals that'll talk about the price being too high. You could literally walk here. The price doesn't seem to be too high from guys from California, New York, and Canada, and Australia, and Germany that show up here. I mean, we get dudes from 20 other countries that come here. but the price is too high for a dude that's 15 minutes away. Those are dudes we don't need.
Right. It's just an interesting mindset we have in the, it's like this push pull in the community. Tell me about this shirt. This arrived in the mail today.
Is that your OnlyFans shirt?
It's my OnlyFans shirt. You like it?
So I do a private content podcast with Scully. He was a lot of people don't realize he was the NCOIC Scout Sniper School West Coast. Ran some special projects, SOTG, that the SEALs had to go through, the Marine Corps, Force Recon, all those dudes. We do a podcast, and we just talk about a lot of stuff. And Jeff says some hateful things about Glocks, and I have a really good content dude that takes the most shocking 15 seconds and puts it on social media. So we have over 6 million views and over 60,000 comments on this thing. So we do a shirt that says only Glocks, and we've got another one that says High Point, the champagne of firearms. And we get people to in-fight on social media, and as a byproduct, we make a lot of money because people spend time on things that they don't like rather than putting the effort into things that actually make their life better. So we just figured out a way to monetize it. So we did some shirts that say only Glocks. Out in public, people look at it automatically and think that it's OnlyFans, and we sell a lot of those shirts.
So what he's saying is when guys double take me, they're not really looking at my boobs, right?
Oh, they probably are looking at your boobs.
Eyes up here, guys. Eyes up here. Anyway, something, Mike, that I've been thinking on this whole live stream is I really wish I'd gotten CJ Kilmer on with you today from the Dangerous History podcast. And the cool thing is you're both going to be speaking at Self-Reliance Festival, which means we might be able to make that happen at Self-Reliance Festival because you both are he's deep into the history side, right? I think that conversation needs to happen.
Do you sponsor Prepping 2.0? Is that, I think I hear you on the backside on Patreon, you do an Intel report or something?
I have been on that show a couple times, but we're not a sponsor over there.
Got it. Do you do anything with Mike Glover?
No.
Okay, you should if he's not on your radar.
Like with AmCon, I was very interested in AmCon because it was a unique approach to a problem that needs to be solved.
I think Mike got a knock on that door in the middle of the night. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. People seem to have no problem taking a paycheck, but can't make the mental leap of generating their own income. Yes, they can. We see it every time we have one of these events. Somebody finally is like, I know what I need to do next. But yeah.
Where do you live? What state are you in, Mike?
I'm in Texas.
Oh, nice. Dallas?
South of there, like Brazos Valley.
It was a joke.
What's your address? Can I throw Joan over it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good dudes in Texas for sure over there.
There's really strong network there, and I love tapping into the Texas guys. So that's just as an aside.
Texas has really great human terrain. This is a place. I mean, Texas has the history and a legacy of having kind of a political resistance. But man, I tell you, just looking at the demographics of Texas, it's scary. There's a real threat of the left turning Texas purple just by taking over the cities. And even if Texas remains red, anytime you go into Houston or Dallas, it's all Houston, especially. They basically had a socialist mayor there, still do. And in a district attorney that won't put criminals behind bars. So I just want to point out, Texas is a red state, but man, we got some real blue problems in the cities.
What do you think's behind them not locking criminals up?
I think it's just a strategy of, well, we've tried locking up criminals and we don't like it. And so now we're going to say, well, let's just use kid gloves on these people because they're really misunderstood. They're not bad people. Just they're factors of their environment, and they're just learn that they shouldn't go out and murder people, and next time they won't, but next time they do. And it's just like a turnstile. People, it's just ridiculous. I don't actually know, other than people like Kim Ogg, for instance. She's a DA there in Houston, and I don't know what the thing is other than just left-wing ideology saying, well, let's just try a different approach, they call it I forget exactly what they call it, but like I don't remember.
Well, she's not affected by her policy. She has a security detail and a gated community, and right. I think it's more insidious. I think it is to instill chaos in the normal population.
Yeah, and this is I just brought this map up because I know Jack just did a show on this. This is the map that matters, right? It's not if the whole state is red or blue.
Yeah,
it's what, like, look at all that. You got a blue tip there in Texas.
The online polling would have you believe that you are the lesser side, right? They would have you believe that you are in the small little pocket, when that is not at all the case.
But those blue areas are generally in urban areas, just pushing through their opinions on everybody else at the state level. But it is interesting when you start talking about a national divorce, like, how do you actually draw that line? You just put a circle over here? Or, do you, which, like, you're always going to have populations in any state that are the opposite, because every state has that, every state has that push-pull. California is looking really blue, though, on this map.
I think one way is, I've seen a lot of Democrats leave Florida. They say, I'm leaving. I don't like the policies here anymore under this fascist governor or whatever they say, and they're leaving. I think that's part of the solution is you have to drive the people that came in. You got to drive those people back out, non-violently, politically, socially. But the same reason why I wouldn't move to San Francisco or Oregon anymore, or any other state that might be a nice place to live if it weren't for all these left-wing policies. All the conservatives just move. Why do we do that? Well, we kind of got to flip the script. I think that's probably a best case, or a best possible course of action forward, is to adopt those policies of the state that they deem so oppressive that they leave. Because that's exactly what those blue states have done to conservatives.
Well, and it is starting to happen over the Roe v. Wade overturn, right? That at the state level, there are stronger abortion protections being put in places at certain states, and people saying, that's it, I have to leave my home state because I cannot live in a state where this happens. And that is one very galvanizing issue. I don't want to go off on that, but I like this statement. The left will say people vote, not the land. Well, I thought they were the environmental party. Oh, sorry. I just had to have my one stupid one-liner there. So Rio Grande Valley has been electing more Republican candidates as of late. They say a lot about Hispanic. That says a lot about Hispanic voters. They're tired of the Democrats losing them.
Yeah, even that's been a mixed bag. I mean, the Republican that won the special election in one of those Rio Grande Valley districts, Mayra Flores, she got ousted. You look at Henry Cuellar, who's a moderate Democrat, Jessica Cisneros, who's an AOC-backed Justice Democrats, kind of Democratic Socialists of America type Democrat candidate. Even she's getting closer and closer to being neck and neck with Henry Cuellar. So I think there is something unique going on in the RGV, but you look at the actual election data, it may not reflect, people have said, and it's absolutely correct, we're no longer an election of votes, we're an election of ballots. And as long as these strongholds can just produce more ballots than we have votes, they will win. RGV is a really great case of Hispanics getting tired of the far left politics. But I would just say, that may not necessarily reflect election outcomes in these areas either.
Well, that and Republicans aren't necessarily liberty-minded. It depends on where they're coming from. And again, I'm in the state I'm in. A lot of our Republicans were Democrats before they realized in order to get voted into office, they had to name themselves something else. And that is part of the game. If you look at how the parties have been changing, they've been going left, right? Over time. That's just what they've been doing. So now what's centrist now would have never been acceptable before. The Overton window's working. It's just going this way right now instead of that way.
Well, I think, I've always been a little L libertarian conservative. I recognize that strategy is failing. It's been a failing strategy for the past 2 or 3 decades. And I look at and I'm not shilling for DeSantis. I'm just looking at the things he's doing in Florida, and he's actually pushing Overton's window to the right in Florida. And there is this Republicans say, well, we don't want to use state power because the Democrats are just going to turn around and say, well, the Republicans did it. We're going to go even farther this time. They do that anyway. And I'm not even trying to get politically partisan, but I think the DeSantis model is the way to go at the state level.
Well, yeah. I mean, you saw all the ports closed in Los Angeles, and he's like, we'll take it, right? So the ships now they're coming into Florida. People say, well, what would we do? I mean, that's what you would do. You would. That's exactly what you would do. Bring them into Texas. Disney. You can go ahead and move to California. Close your shit up. You're done.
Mm-hmm. And two, the question was, why isn't there not more community organizing done on the right? That's predominantly a young radicals game. And one thing DeSantis is doing with state-funded colleges and universities is removing a lot of the CRT and the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff that gives those universities a strategic advantage to indoctrinate more students. And I think by turning that around, it's not going to solve the problem entirely. But one reason why the left is very good at community organizing and the right is not, is because all those people, all the radicals doing the community organizing have gone through that pipeline, or they're making $15 an hour to go out and do it. But it's not 60-year-olds out there beating on doors. It's unemployed 25-year-olds who are doing this because they're true believers. And there's just not that there's not that symmetry on the right yet.
It's funny. I was just at an event full of community activists, and they were 40 to 50-year-old women, most of them, some of them younger women. There's a gender difference too. I am seeing more women organizers or female organizers right now. That's just me, but happy Taco Tuesday. Oh, 30-year anniversary of Waco. Remember Waco? You're from Texas.
Yeah, it's creepy. My wife and I drove by there several years ago, and there's still people. The Branch Davidians are still out there. They got houses and trailers and stuff still living out there. It's creepy. Oh, I was creeped out. But they're still out there.
Yep, and they will be. They will be. Okay, I believe another train derailed in Florida. Every train that derails, we're going to hear about loudly for the next 6 months.
So there's 1,750 trains derailed last year. It's a very common occurrence. What you're not hearing, for instance, there was just a train that derailed in Memphis, and there was quite a chemical spill, and they built a dam around it and buried it, and they didn't release it. Nobody even heard of it. You're seeing a lot of this stuff is happening. A lot of those trains that are derailing from middle to the East Coast, they're all the same company. There's a lot of the infrastructure is just not there. The main bridge going across the Mississippi River in Memphis is cracked. There's cracks in the bridge. You can paddle under it and see it. They actually closed it for a while, did a temporary repair. We always talk about infrastructure, but our infrastructure is 100 years old. We just don't put the money into it. And the railway, they don't want to fix it, and the government doesn't want to fix it, and the state doesn't want to pay for it. They want the feds to pay for it, and it's just, I mean, it happens, and it's happening. It seems like it has sped up because we are sensitive to it, but I do believe that there is something to all of it, right? When you look at all of it, all of the poultry places that have been unpopulated, that's what they call it when they come in and euthanize all the birds. We've had 3 aircraft strikes on food production facilities this last year. It's growing, right? All the chemical plants that are catching on fire and the fuel, and maybe it is aging infrastructure, or maybe it's a combination of a lot of different things, but at least we are talking about it. You realize now how just fucked up this system is, right? Most people get their news from CNN. People on here probably don't, but the majority of the people out in the world, when you walk around with the zombies, that's all they know is what they heard on CNN.
I read an NPR article this morning, and I'm trying to remember what it was. because I wanted to, doesn't matter. We're like kind of like, that pair of jeans that you wore for 15 years because they were comfortable. And then eventually the threads started rotting and they were falling apart. I think our infrastructure is a lot like that because of the way our monetary system is. It does not make logical sense to invest long-term in stability for that. And it's interesting that things my grandfather built when he was young are the things we're watching fall apart now. And there's no similar effort to build.
Like Mike said, the fleecing of the United States. I mean, I feel like that's just another clue that we're, us not fixing infrastructure because they're planning to just bail, right? They're just pulling as much out as they can, building bunkers. I don't know where they're all going to end up, but it sure looks like they are just planning to leave and take as much and get as much as they can right now before they take off.
Yeah, if somebody says you had jeans for 15 years, I sure did until about 10 years ago, and now I just have jeans for 6 months to a year. But it was a total shock when I went from I never have to buy pants to I have to buy pants twice a year now, and that's the way our stuff is built.
Are you all familiar with Sir John Glubb and the Fate of Empires?
Yes, I'm familiar with the names. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really like an essay. It's 20 or 30 pages long, but if you just look up Sir John Glubb, Glubb, Fate of Empires, he goes through like 30 different empires, maybe 34, and he's calculated out that the average empire lasts about 10 generations or 250 years, and he goes through all the phases of empire. And in the late stage of empires, you have a people that are so disconnected from the original founding, the original spark or ideology that founded that empire. They're so disconnected from it. They don't have that zeal. They're not connected to it anymore. And he talks about how mass immigration is often a cause of this because there are people who come in that have no connection to a revolution or have no connection to the founding or to the founding people who started the empire. And, an empire by definition is just many groups of people under the same government because of that nation or that people that have expanded so far that they just include everybody in. And, you look at I remember 20 years ago, there were Democrats who said the American state's been hollowed out. And now you look at all of our infrastructure problems and, we're giving all this money to, and again, I don't mean to be highly political here, but we're giving tons of money to Ukraine to fight against the Russians. And we've got veterans here at home who are going hungry, who can't get a surgery through the VA because, whatever, they jumped out of an airplane and broke their back. And now they said, oh, it's not service connected or, whatever. And that is the definition of a hollowed out state to me. And I think there's a lot of stock. By the way, there's another guy, I can't pronounce his last name. He did a separate study, an independent study from Glubb. And he arrived at the age of the lifespan of the average empire was 2.65 centuries or 265 years, which is really close to Glubb's 250 years. And I think there's a lot of, historically, there is data to support the United States being in, or I should say the American empire being at the final stages of empire. And infrastructure breaking, and we can't even run trains in this country. That's a key indicator. I would think of an empire in collapse domestically.
Yeah, I think everybody I speak to thinks we are going through a collapse right now. And the only argument they have is what to do next.
Well, the difference between now and then is we keep our people who won't work alive. Like we feed them, right? If you won't work, you don't eat. I don't care what you do, but I'm not going to fund you and nobody else is going to fund you. How did we build the Hoover Dam, right? How did those railways get built? People were starving and they waited weeks to get a job and they showed up and there was not a choice, right? But now everybody is owed something, right? If they're not willing to go work or they're not willing to create or do something on their own, other people are forced to, fund that.
Yeah. The article I wrote was about Dilbert that I read this morning. because I was trying to understand that situation. But
Yeah, well,
just
he
to bring
said,
us something else that's controversial today.
yeah. So not only are they getting rid of him, they're getting rid of the entire cartoon.
Yeah. Hopefully you have your hard copy of those books, guys.
Yeah, no.
That was I just happened to do a podcast on crisis communications yesterday, unaware that was going on, because I don't start my day by looking at the news. And so
Well,
that was
don't be in a situation where you can be,
Yeah.
unpersoned. Don't be in a situation where they can just, remove you.
I don't think he's going to be unpersoned.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's a very small that are upset about it, right? So the rest of them virtue signal to make it okay.
Yep. So the people who won't work are government employees now. They live in government homes, get their government checks. Yeah. So are we past the 50% government employed at this point? Does anybody know? So we've been slowly marching towards more than half of our population supported by government paychecks, whether that's military, working in local governments, government schools, government subsidized healthcare jobs, any of those things. And then, of course, there are people who receive their subsistence support from the welfare system. And as we move closer and closer to 50% and then over it, it becomes very, very difficult to make any change in any of those programs, because, it's just like, we can't change the tax code because a bunch of accountants and IRS agents, we couldn't simplify it. They'd all be out of work. That's the argument. You actually hear people say that. So let's waste everybody's time tracking all this bullshit because we need to keep the accountants employed.
Well, a flat tax would alleviate all of that.
Right. It's an interesting time to watch as we head towards. It's got to reset. I don't see it not resetting. We're either gonna go full retard on this, or something has to reset.
Nouriel Roubini has this great book called Mega Threats, and the very first chapter is called The Mother of All Debt Crises. And he says in the next 20 years, at some point in the next 20 years, it could be 20 months, the United States is going to have to wrestle with its debt. And so it's very possible that we have our own reckoning, before then. 20 years is an interesting timeline, because you look at the average lifespan of a currency as the world reserve currency is between 80 to 100 years, maybe 110 years on the far end. And that's all the way back to the 1300s. And JP Morgan did this study, 80 to 100 years. Bretton Woods submitted the US dollar as the world reserve currency in 1944. You add 80 years, you get 2024. You add 100 years, you get 2044. So really, I think realistically, within 20 years is probably an accurate timeline of the end of the dollar as the world reserve, which means the end of U.S. military global dominance, which means the end of the U.S. empire. It's going to happen within many of our lifetimes.
So what do you think that looks like? What do you think that looks like?
Well, I would say on the best case scenario, well, I don't know. I'm not trying to
just do it, man.
Yeah. I would say the least harmful scenario would be the British scenario. I mean, the British Empire collapsed following World War II, but the pound is still around. They still have a country. I don't think the United States, I don't think that's going to happen here. I'm actually a proponent of, probably not surprising, but I think certain parts of the United States will balkanize once the dollar goes, because once these states who have natural resources, we're about to go through a commodity super cycle, and especially with oil, and a lot of these states that, like West Virginia, that could be exporting coal.
Yep.
There's a good chance that they say, we're going to put our people back to work. We're going to start exporting coal. And if DC won't allow us to do that, then we're going to do it ourselves and go our separate ways. I think there's a strong case for that. And that's another potential, is that we have a Balkanization of the United States.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Texit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar. Yep.
Yeah, we got coal here in Tennessee too. You've got oil. Alaska, a perfect example. The only people that don't want to mine Alaska are the people that want to go there once in their lifetime to look at Denali. The people in Alaska, they want to mine Alaska.
And that's not unusual. in any state. Oh, we have this resource. Let's use the resource.
Yeah.
So, well, if we balkanize, what does that mean?
Probably hyperinflation. Number one, it probably means state currencies. It probably, for the best case scenario, it means a return to sound money for some states. Maybe it's maybe a regional currency. It's tough to say, other than it's going to be very painful. I mean, there is no part of history where balkanization has been easy. A lot of times, especially where we get the Balkan, the term balkanization, the Balkan Peninsula, from the fall of the Ottoman Empire all throughout World War II and into the Cold War, you get a lot of ethnic strife and ethnic violence and wars. You get sometimes genocide, ethnic cleansing. I mean, just really brutal periods of history. And I would say on the worst case scenario, that's what we're looking at, and this all goes back to, if you start a regional preparedness network and gather like-minded people and you build political, social, and economic power, you're going to have strategic advantages heading into this period that other people do not. That the people say, oh, I have 7 years worth of food and I got 10,000 rounds of ammo and I got 15 AR-15s and man, I'm set for the end of the world. That dude is going to die. It takes people to survive this. And when you go back to Glubb and read other people who've done the academic literature on the end of empires, they're subsumed. Most often, they're subsumed from the inside. So, like the Soviet Union, for instance, that had an extractive economy. They just extracted so much value from the kulaks and the average Russians, and spent so much money they eventually imploded because there's no value left in the country. The government extracted it all from everybody, and that may happen in the United States, but a lot of that power is going to go back to local government. So if your local government is solid, then you have a fighting chance at having a better life for your kids than they would otherwise. And so I think building strong local bonds is highly important. Social cohesion is by far the most important strategic asset you can have. Jack Goldstone, I'll wrap up in just a second, but Jack Goldstone writes about this, about rebellions and revolutions in the early modern period. He looks at 5 different case studies, like France and China and some others, Britain, the English Civil War specifically. He looks at, and he says the greatest determining factor in success of societies is social cohesion. The most socially cohesive societies, the best organized societies, tend to fare the best. And the question is, look within 100 miles of where you live. Is your tribe the best organized society? If so, you have a fighting chance. If not, you don't.
Well, the other thing that happens when areas balkanize is some amount of migration, unless somebody cuts borders down, right? Where
maybe
people move if they can. It's not pretty sometimes, but they do move.
Well, the question is, if you have hyperinflation, you have disruption of oil and gas, people aren't going to be moving very far.
Right.
I mean, that's my only counterpoint is, I think people are going to be restricted on mobility. If they can afford to, it may not be safe enough. Or, the question is where they're going safer than where they are now? And the path to get there, is it safer? And I'm not trying to get into like doomsday prepper fiction stuff here, but I think that is a factor that you have to plan for. And that's why it comes down to doing your area study. I mean, that is the most basic foundational preparedness and security planning step you can do to plan for something like this that could happen.
I think it's funny when you started talking about area studies at the beginning of the episode. A. Ray Pierce said, I did my area study and my conclusion was I need to move.
Yeah.
I need a GTFO. So,
yeah, if you're in a major city, it's just not sustainable. You're literally one day away from change for the rest of your life. There's just too many variables.
And I think people who are my age know people that happen to, where cut off husbands and wives cut off by the Berlin Wall. I've actually talked to those people. It was one morning, and that afternoon didn't see the husband again for 20 years. That's how fast that can happen. Not to be doomsy. I am actually I'm probably more optimistic than anybody on this call about where we're going, because I think I'm just an optimistic person, but I see the power. What I see when I look at situations that mirror ours, sometimes it gets really bad, but eventually the ingenuity of the human mind comes out of that. It just may not be while I'm alive, but it comes out of that and ends up in an even better place than it was before. And that's a cycle that I've seen a lot of when I look. So that's where my optimism comes from. I'm going to do my best to be here to see something like that happen, but I can only do so much.
Benchmark says mobility will be limited as soon as they mandate electric cars. It's even beyond that, man. I mean, with your smart meters and stuff, they can literally just turn your electricity off of a laptop. But even beyond that, I mean, just limit your access to internet. Your business would be done without internet, Benchmark, as would mine. That's what really the last 3-4 years we've moved towards, is if they locked down shipping, if we were not able to ship, or if they turned off the postal service, we'd be out of business 100%. So what do you do when that happens, right? And that's everything we've done on the property and everything that's happened in the last couple of years. That's where I've put literally all of my effort that is not, building nylon tactical equipment. Everything has gone into infrastructure local here for us and my guys. Most of my dudes that work for me are prior service dudes that have moved from other states, right? So how do we continue to feed them? And that's what everything you've seen on our social media and our content for the last 3 years has been that.
John's very good at producing meat from his property.
Anybody can be. I mean, it's anything, right? Wood. Look how much wood's sitting around that you could just turn into firewood. How do you do that and reduce human beings and wear and tear on people, right? And you just use equipment for that.
You say anybody can do it, and you're right, but not anybody does do it. And a lot of people try to do it and are unsuccessful. So I think
no, they don't try to do it. They like to talk about doing it. See, that's the one thing that every human being has in common, is we all have 24 hours. The difference between us is what we do with our 24 hours and how much we can tolerate. People see, we have coddled children and these last couple generations, so they don't know the difference between words, right? And they say things like hurt. They look at hurt as injured. We pick them up because we don't want to hear them scream, and we don't let them have any difficulties in life. So we have produced a whole generation of weak people, and they think that hurt means the same as injured. And every time somebody tells me my bad back or whatever, I'm like, well, I know dudes that have been literally blown up, missing limbs, who have still done 3 more deployments after the fact. So my calibration is very low for I can't, because all I hear is I won't.
Had to get one of those in for that show, John. Thank you. You're right, though. But it's something that it's people who think, or who have a hard time envisioning, how do I make this happen? If you see what John has done to what was in essence a gravel lot when he moved in, right? It did not have soil. And now he's got trees, fodder trees, fruit trees growing. He's got livestock that graze through there, all sorts of abundance around that property. It's worth going out to Camden just to see that. And I think it's impressive, John.
We did it by hand. The equipment is only relatively new. Mother Nature is going to do it, whether you want to or not. If things collapse, Mother Nature is going to do that. You might as well assist it so that in the future you can have kind of what you want.
So have you heard all the hullabub about the 15-minute cities?
Yeah, they're doing them in Europe right now. What you need to look at is the code word for 15-minute city is smart city, right? Look at your infrastructure through major cities right now. Sound abatement walls, right? They were 10 feet and then they were 15, now they're 20. If you put a drone up around those corridors on the interstates, those walls go around those neighborhoods also. Why would that be? Why do we need sound abatement on the backside? It's about controlling human beings. It's not about sound.
Got anything to add to that, Mike?
I just think that's the can-do attitude that built this country. And if there's any hope for optimism, I would say number one, it's maybe the belief that we still have some shred of God's providence. But number two, it's the can-do attitude that built this country that still exists in some portion of the population, that we can do it again. It's going to be painful for a while, but maybe our kids will have it better than we do. But it motivates me to do all the things I need to be doing at the local level to make sure that, my son's generation is going to be able to grow up and have it better than what they would have under the existing system. Maybe it's not his generation, maybe it's the next, but we got to get that ball rolling.
You got to plant that seed.
Plant the seed, and it happens faster than we think when we look at historical examples. It happens very quickly. I look at the work ethic of my grandparents' generation, which isn't that long ago, came out of the Depression. Depression was not fun times at all. And look what they did. And I think at the end of the day, the lesson to take from that is don't wait for your kids to do that. We need to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's part of why I like finding doers and doing things with doers. It works great. So I'm really looking forward to, so Mike has something unique for us at the Self-Reliance Festival, in that he's doing a area study workshop sort of thing. And everybody comes to Self-Reliance Festival, you get 45 minutes, right, Mike? Except for he gets 2 hours. So he was like, I can't do it in 45 minutes, Nicole, if I really want to make a difference. So he has a longer segment so that he has time to dive deeper into how to really get this done for yourself, for your area, which I think is going to be a really cool addition. And then I really can't wait to put you and CJ Kilmer in a room together and talk a little bit, because I think that conversation needs to be recorded for sure. So that's happening, guys, March 25th and 26th in Camden, Tennessee at Special Operations Equipment's campus. If you haven't gotten your ticket yet, that's selfreliancefestival.com. I see a few of you. How many in the comments are you already coming? Put yes. Just curious to see who is paying attention at this time. Are you coming to Self-Reliance Festival?
Have you met Bear Independent, Mike?
Not in person. I've talked to him.
That's how I found you, was from him. He'll be here at Self-Reliance Festival.
Okay, right on. Looking forward to
dude.
that.
Yeah, I've met him several times.
Yeah. So, Lynn, I just saw you bought your ticket. So we got a couple in the comments. I'm not seeing tons, which means there are more than 70 of you who have not bought your tickets yet. That's over at selfreliancefestival.com if you want to grab them. Yeah, medical class. So Bear Independent is doing an emergency medical class on Friday. That's almost sold out, actually, at this point. And I just heard they're changing. They're not opening their classes to the public for a while they redo how they offer classes. So it's one of the last chances, if you haven't grabbed something from their website, to do it. So that's going to be fun too. Let's go once around the horn. Everybody, just say what you want to say. Mike, I'm going to end on you. John, I'm going to start with you.
Listen, we always talk Great Depression, right? You need to focus on, there was a lot of fortunes made during the Great Depression. You don't have to be the bottom end of that, right? It's literally his mindset. And I know that people have a hard time with that. But if you make up the decision that you're not going to be the fodder and the bottom that is told in the next, history books, you could also just be the opposite of that. A lot of that is just identify a need and then work around that need. Figure out how to provide a service or something positive. And you don't have to be the bottom that gets walked on. You don't have to, and that's everything. That's even today. Like, there are so many actionable things right now that could literally set the course of your life, that would change history, right? His story. You could be the lever that changes your whole family's name in the future.
So one of the things I've loved watching happen with our community is through the changes of the last few years. And by our community, I mean the overlap of John's and mine's and Mike's and people who are generally waking up or awake and wanting to do something. As the spirit of what's going on changes, new additions to what we're learning and the skills we're practicing and exchanging happens. And what is happening right now is situational awareness, area studies, more on defense, off-grid living, off-grid solutions, and growing food. And there's always that small business startup. But when I see that zeitgeist change, I pay attention to it. And I'm excited to learn all of the new things that are coming up. But I also want to point out what they are. Okay, just listen to that list again, right? Situational awareness, area studies, self-defense, home defense, growing your own food. What do those things add to? Off-grid living. What does that hedge against? But what prosperity does that bring to your life in a moving forward standpoint as well? As you add those sorts of things to your life, you are more stable, more resilient, and more able to operate in a positive way for yourself, for your family, and for the community around you. And so I think it's all strength, and it's important to pay attention to. Anyway, I'm going to hand it to you, Mike, to wrap us up.
This will be my first time and going to the Self-Reliance Festival. And I plan, as long as I don't screw things up, I'd like to make this an annual trip for me, even if I'm not a speaker, just to go, because this builds social cohesion. The opportunities like this to go out and break bread and share information and learn skills. I hear from my audience, at least, they say, I don't know any like-minded people. I don't know any preppers in my area. I'm the only guy in my city or block that I can't talk to people about this stuff. They don't want to hear it. And even some spouses like, oh, my wife doesn't want to hear this, or oh, my husband doesn't care about this stuff. And so this is a time to build social cohesion. And I'm going to tell all my folks, go out. If you live within a few hours drive, go, and maybe even longer than that. But go for the weekend. It's I think it's a time for people to, Maslow's hierarchy, belonging is so important for this community because, a lot of people just want to tune out. They don't want to think about bad things, or they don't want to consider that any alternative to the existing system could ever exist. And I would just encourage everyone to go, because these events could be the difference between life and death, between the skills you learn and the people you meet. So go.
One last thing, like people always say, I don't know where to meet people, or I don't know any people. You have to go where people are doing the things you want to do. We have people that come from California, and I use those as examples because they're as far as you can get on the coast. People come here and meet each other and have been married. Like we've had people that have met at the events that are already having children, literally that lived 10, 15, 20 minutes apart and came here to meet each other. You got to go where people are doing what you want to do. And I'll end that with, man, Mike, I'm really looking forward to meeting you. I want to be friends. And dude, thank you for coming on with us, man. I hit Nicole up 6 months ago and I'm like, we have to get this guy on here. I want it. Like I watch his stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, sir. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I love talking about this stuff. I'm glad you all do too. And I'm on board for whatever you need. Just let me know.
Awesome. I look forward to meeting you in person. Thanks for making time today. And guys, we'll be back next week.